Hello, and welcome to Spokane County Spotlight. I'm your County Commissioner, Josh Kerns, and today on the program, we have two very special guests. On our program, we are joined with two of our local state legislators. We have from the 4th Legislative District, Suzanne Schmidt, and from the 6th Legislative District, Mike Voles. Thank you both for being here today.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yes. So each of you represent two districts that are located here in Spokane County, and each of those districts are very unique, represent different parts of the county. For some of our residents here that may not be familiar with the 4th Legislative District and the 6th Legislative District, I'd like to give them a little bit of background about each of the districts. So, Suzanne, if you could start off by telling our viewers about the 4th Legislative District, what are kind of the rough boundaries and what makes that a unique district to our area?
Well, the 4th Legislative District, so it's going to be east of Highway 2, and that would be down to the incorporated line of Spokane Valley and Liberty Lake, and then up into Elk, and then all the way over to Idaho. So it's a pretty large district. Very, we have manufacturing, we have farming. There's a lot of diverse industry in the 4th District. I would say what really makes us unique is that we are a border, more so than the other districts in the Spokane County. We're a border, so we're right up against the Idaho border. So I think a lot of the conversations that I have with my constituents are about being so close to the border and just how different Washington is in comparison to Idaho.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, you cover everything from, you've got your major city center there in the valley, but I mean, you've got suburban, you've got that urban, and you certainly have rural when you get into the north part of that county. And certainly, I'm sure there are benefits and drawbacks to being so close to the border, right on it there. All right, well, Representative Mike Voles, representing the 6th Legislative District, which the 6th Legislative District had actually changed quite a bit over the years, sort of being, south part of the county, north part of the county, but has always kind of kept that suburban type setting over the years. But could you tell us a little bit about the 6th District and what makes it unique to our area?
Well, yeah, thank you, Commissioner. So the 6th District is west of Highway 2 all the way up to Deer Park. It doesn't include Deer Park in it, but it goes all the way up north, right next to the 4th District. It's also north of like I-90, which includes Airway Heights and Medical Lakes. It includes the suburbs of North Spokane. Now, most of the North Spokane, I lived by Whitworth, and I was right at the edge of the old 6th District, and the old 6th District wrapped around included Cheney and the South Hill all the way down to the beginning of the Palouse. So this was a pretty big change. We lost Cheney, we lost all the South Hill, and those kind of the beginning of the Palouse. So it's more of a north side district. We also dipped down into Hilliard now too, which is a new part of the district, which is kind of right in the middle of where the north-south corridor is sitting and the north-south freeways there. So that was kind of a big project, I think, for both of us in the region. So we have it's an interesting district. Have a air base and an airport, and manufacturing up in the West Plains, a couple casinos, and then kind of suburban and urban-ish type of communities closer to town.
Okay, well, thank you, and thank you for your commitment to our region. I know both of you have been over there for several years. This most recent legislative session wrapped up at the tail end of April. There were a whole slew of bills that were just recently signed in by the governor. Could you tell us some of the wins, some of the good legislation that passed that are going to impact in a positive way each of your districts here locally?
So thank you, Commissioner Kerns. I'll go ahead and start from the 4th District. And anyway, I would say that some of the positive things that we saw as far as legislation would probably be more of things that we were able to stop from going into becoming policy than necessarily more that was helpful.
Okay.
But we did have a couple of pieces of legislation. I had a couple of bills that actually did do some, made some differences for Spokane and the Spokane Valley. But I think that where we had some really good wins was in our capital budget requests. So the capital budget is different than the other budgets because it's money that's funded. And so we're just looking at where are we going to invest that money throughout the state. So we had some really good wins in the 4th district from the capital budget. We had we had money for some schools. We had money for the Plants Ferry. We got some money for that. I actually worked with Senator Riccelli on that, making sure that we had that for Spokane County. We were also able to bring some money back for the Mount Spokane, getting actually a ADA so that they're going to have an elevator there so that handicapped people will be able to ski as well. So yeah, we had some wins as far as that goes, but we also, I'm going to count some of the things that we stopped as wins.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to touch on any of those bills that that you were able to stop?
Yeah, so a couple of the things, one was the camping. So it was a House Bill 1380, and that was a bill basically that would have allowed encampments throughout the state. I know that we've voted for Prop 1 in the city of Spokane, and the city of Spokane has some going on back and forth over that, but being able to stop that at a state level. So that's what that legislation would have allowed it, and would have made it much more difficult for the cities to actually have their own rules and be locally ran. So we were able to stop that. There was also one for the sheriff's department that law enforcement agencies that were elected, and for the Attorney General's office to actually be able to decertify them if they felt they weren't following, state law. So we were able to kill that bill, and which was really good for law enforcement. They were very happy that we were able to kill that bill, especially the sheriffs, because they are voted in by the people, and that would have allowed the Attorney General to intercede when the Attorney General didn't feel that the county was being ran according to state law.
Wow. Okay. Representative Voles, any of those highlights you wanted to focus on?
Yeah, and I just want to echo what you said about the sheriff. It basically would give the Attorney General to unelect an elected official for the first time, I think, in state history. And we couldn't find any reference of that nationally, where a person elected, there's a recall effort. There's a method to recall any elected official in the state, but to put it into the hands of another elected official in a partisan environment was totally inappropriate. So I think that was a big win. Another one was, Suzanne Rep. Schmidt worked very, very hard on the unemployment for striking workers, which we didn't stop, but I think it's an improvement in some regards because of her work. So I think those were wins-ish. When you're in a minority, you take what you can get. I think the capital budget was another area where we won. We got, effort I spearheaded was getting some money for PFAS up in the West Plains, which, as you know, has been a very big and contentious issue. I still don't think it's 100% a state obligation, but we did get $7.5 million to help people at the wellhead to get clean water up there, which is important. It's a federal issue. It's not just statewide, but it's nationally on anytime you have an air base and an airport, and we have both up in the 6th, you're going to have PFAS. And so I guess the military bases are worse than the commercial ones for a variety of reasons. So I think hopefully there's going to be some federal effort on that, but at least we got $7.5 million is a good start to get going. And of course, I think the north-south corridor is a key win because before Suzanne got elected, I was already lobbying to get her on transportation committee. I've been on there, and so because I thought it was important to have that two people on it from Spokane. Both of us voted for it, as did most of the local contingent. I think your Senator Christensen voted no on it, but most everybody else locally supported that effort and voted to get that project done. So that was the big win. It's, and if you recall, it was a pretty big fight when Inslee took it out of the budget in the previous cycle. So we fought then, we fought now. It's in there. It's supposed to be completed by 2030?
2030.
Yeah,
yes.
so knock on wood. I know Commissioner French has made comments that he wants to drive down it alive and not in a hearse.
In the front of a hearse, not the back.
In the front of the hearse, not in the back.
So hopefully we get that done. So a lot of people have put in a lot of effort, and so I think that's probably the biggest win. And I didn't run any, I didn't push any other big projects or transportation projects focused solely on that.
Yeah, I've almost lost count how many times the whole community has had to rally together to go back and protect that funding that has been promised time and time again and then pulled back, promised, pulled back. So thank you both for your efforts on that. Which actually, and I apologize, I didn't ask, could each of you please say the committees that you serve on? So Representative Schmidt?
Sure. So I am on Labor and Workplace Standards. So I'm actually the ranking member of Labor and Workplace Standards. And then I'm on Transportation. I'm an assistant ranking on Transportation and also part of the Budget Cabinet. And then I'm on the Post-Secondary Education and Workforce Development.
Okay, all right. And Representative Voles?
So I am on Transportation, of course. I'm on Consumer Protection and Business, and I'm on the, the Innovation, Community, Economic Development, and Veterans Committee, which I just refer to as the committee with the longest name.
Well, I think you both are certainly on committees that I think fit your skill set very, very well. So we're very well represented there. So thank you for that. Representative Voles, you had a bill that you ran that would have eased, or that will ease sort of the burden on senior citizens as far as freezing the assessment on their home values. And so can I ask you to sort of tell our viewers a little bit about that bill and kind of how that worked out this year?
Well, what the bill does, and I've been in the treasurer's office. I was first hired there in 1999, so I've been associated with that all but 4 years for the last, 26 years now. Started as an accountant, and now I'm the appointed county treasurer. And so I know very well the property tax issues in the state, and we're hearing more and more from seniors and working families having a harder and more difficult time keeping up with their taxes because of the increase in taxes, the increase in value, and really because of a deep systemic affordability crisis because of a lot of policies that came out of Olympia, raising fuel prices, raising energy prices, heating, all that stuff impacts it. Housing prices, rents way up because of policies at the state level. And so this effort was just to give them some relief and at least some predictability, where at 65 under certain criteria, your value would be frozen.
Okay.
At 65, disabled veteran, a disabled individual. So under certain criteria, your value was frozen. Now, I wrote the bill very broad, and I told everyone, there's a spoiler alert on any bill of substance, any big bill, it never is the same as it starts. There's always amendments. So I was very clear on that. I did have some very good bipartisan co-sponsors on the bill. I think Rep. Schmidt was one, and I had some Democrats sign off on it. I just didn't get a hearing, but worked it, and that's one of the issues. I will. It's still on the books. We'll take another run at it next year and see what happens there.
Yeah, and for our viewers at home, when a bill is introduced that first year, it's still alive the second session of the biennium if it doesn't make it through the first time. So, all right. You had also ran a bill to protect women's sports, and I just wonder if you wanted to talk to us about that effort and sort of what the situation is there. We know it's a hot button issue right now in our community and across the country.
Correct, and Washington maybe more so in a lot of places. We had just a recent, an individual here locally, a young man who was in women's sports and high school sports, won the championship, and which upset a lot of the young ladies. And so I ran the bill really because it's The intent is we at some point we have to align with the trend of what's going on, not just nationally but internationally, with the NCAA changing their rules, the International Sports Federation are changing those rules. So this really, I mean, we're in a situation where we're depriving young ladies of opportunities for the next level, for, you know, not just the awards and the acknowledgement of their hard work over their, you know, their young lives, but also an opportunity to go maybe to college and get a scholarship and advance their education. So that was the intent of that. I think we'll see how things will unfold nationally. It may become more of an issue next year, depending on the direction the federal government's going on some of the funding with some of these states that are kind of in a similar boat as Washington State is, where they could actually lose a significant amount of funding. Plus, we're looking at there's a number of lawsuits that are coming out of Washington State and other states on this very issue, both civil and criminal, you know, or challenging it under the law. So we'll see, like myself, we'll see how that weaves its way through the courts and through the federal government, and see what happens over the next few months and probably next couple of years.
All right. Well, thank you for taking a lead on that. It's an extremely important issue to folks here locally, for sure.
Absolutely. We've heard from a number of school boards, and honestly, the feed. You know, I knew anytime you do a bill like that, you know, somebody's going to be cranky about it. But I did get a lot of feedback from people, and this is kind of paraphrasing it and shortening it, like, Mike, we don't agree with much anything you do, but thank you for doing this. So there's people across the spectrum that understood the need and the importance for this. Not everyone, of course. You never, if you get 100%, it's probably not a good bill, you know, or it's too simple. But anyway, so there's a lot of you know, overwhelmingly positive input on that, and some people upset, and that's fine. That's part of the job.
Okay. Representative Schmidt, you had, I believe, 5 bills that were signed into law this year. That's got to be a record. But no, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Could you, would you like to tell us about a few of them?
Yeah. So one of them I had been working on for 3 years, and it was a specialty electrician bill. What had happened is legislation had went into place back in 2021 that changed the way that a commercial electrician could get their license. When that change took place, we left some electricians behind. We went from it had to be a state-approved apprenticeship program. There was at one point you could be a trainee and then work your way in and test for the commercial electrician. At any rate, we left some people behind. So what my bill does is allows those folks that we're still working under the trainee program to work as journeyman electricians in the residential area, while at the same time in an apprenticeship trying to get their commercial license. So there was a large community that was out there asking me for help, and it was one of the things that as I ran for office that I was working on. It took a couple of years to get it through, but I was able to get it through. I even had IBEW, so the IBEW, Internal Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. They actually testified pro for my bill, so that was a big deal. So we got that passed, and then the other, another one I would tell you about is that I ran for the fire district in my area, and that was to eliminate, it would give the ability for the fire district to eliminate the Civil Service Commission as part of their hiring process. And the reason for that is they were having difficulty filling positions because the commission is actually ran by volunteers. And so they were having a problem with volunteers, getting the volunteers, and then having a quorum. And so we weren't getting firefighters put into positions in certain districts because of that rule. So actually Chief Soto, Frank Soto from the Spokane Valley Fire Department came to me, and the fire commissioners out there came to me before session and asked me if there was some legislation that I could run that would help them with this. And so I ran a bill, and it was passed. And and that they actually came over when I had it signed by the governor. They flew over so they could be with me as we had it signed by the governor. So
that's great.
Yeah, it helped my community, and that's exactly what I'm there for. So
that's great. That's great. They were able to be there for the bill signings. Those are those are quite the quite the event there.
Yeah.
I know it, when I worked 6 years in the legislature prior to becoming a commissioner, and attending those bill signings is quite the event. It goes pretty quick, honestly. They get you in, they get you out, but it is quite the experience to be there for those bill signings. So I'm glad you were able to have the local folks from the Valley Fire Department to be there for that. That was very special for them, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You know, we've talked about some of the good, we've talked about some of the bad, and so now let's talk about some of the ugly in the legislative session. You know, I know a lot of folks have been talking about the tax increases that were passed, said to be the largest tax increases in a single session, I believe, in state history. So Representative Voles, if we can start with you, if you want to if you can give some of our viewers some of the history, the background, how this was used on the budget, and really what's the impact going to be to local taxpayers here?
So, so this is my 9th year there. I'm beginning my 5th term, and it's been pretty much record tax increase on record tax increase on record tax increase every year, every 2-year cycle. And so we're about double, maybe we're a little more than double when I started, and I know family incomes and I know business income and aren't doubling over the same period of time. And quite frankly, the taxes haven't really yielded the results as expected. I was there through the McCleary, which is the funding of education, where they put billions extra into education, and yet our schools have failed. And I got a little bit of criticism for saying that, so I want to be clear. It's not the school administrators, it's not the school boards, it's not the teachers, it's not the aides, it's not the janitors in the school that have failed. It's our school system statewide has failed. We have less than half the kids that can pass any one of the 3 tests in science, in English, or math, 50% or less can pass, and that's a real problem. That's I think by any standard, that's an F, and the state standard is 90% of the kids will pass these tests, any one test. Now, I can't recall the percentage of kids who pass all 3 sections, and there's a chunk who fail all 3, and so we're not doing well. And you look at housing. I've heard about housing for 9 years now. Nothing that we've done in Olympia has helped with affordability of housing. We've raised fuel prices. We've raised prices on pretty much everything, every service, everything. We're going after fuel again, which when you tax fuel, you know, my background's finance, and I'm a CPA and all that wonderful stuff, but when you tax fuel particularly, you tax everything. There is nothing that's in the store, every ho-ho, Twinkie, loaf of bread, bears a little bit of that fuel increase. And so it's really getting hammered, and I kind of touched on it earlier, the affordability issues in Washington State. And I'm hearing more and more about people in Idaho, like where it's much more noticeable than it has. It's always been a little bit more expensive in Washington than Idaho, but now it's increasingly so. So I think a lot of that is going to bear fruit. Evidently right now there's people already going around the state trying to blame something that's happening at the federal level or somewhere else, rather than taking responsibility and accountability for their own actions. And it's clear, and we tell them, and we've told them for the last 9 years, that if you do this, then that will something will happen. If you raise the price of fuel will go up, and other stuff will go up, and that's exactly what happened. So it's a challenge, but and I think it's there's nothing out there that on that side, on the tax side, that I see as really improving much of anything. But that's my read on it. I also think that they have a poor track record of meeting these revenue expectations. So I think we might have a very busy short session addressing if they miss the mark on these revenue assumptions. So we will know probably beginning in like September, when the revenue forecasts start rolling out, as we get closer to session, on if that's a true statement or not. But historically, they've missed the mark on those, like they did in the previous budget, which our deficit was not based on a poor economy. It was based on poor predictions and overly optimistic assumptions. So. It'll be fun.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm just going to kind of jump off that as, the assumptions. And so that's what we were assuming that we were going to bring in more revenue. So all of these taxes that have been passed in the last 5 years, all of these increases, there was an assumption that, of course, we were going to collect those, and we were collecting them at a higher rate than they're coming in. And what I've seen, and I've been, working with even the Seattle Chamber of Commerce, the Spokane Chamber of Commerce, but what we're seeing is a lot of businesses going out of business under the stress of all of these new taxes. And these are the ones that were in place before this tax package was paid or passed. That's, so going into this budget, I agree with Representative Volz. I think we're going to see that, when we go into this next short session, that we're going to, that I think those revenues are going to fall short, because what we've been doing is overestimating how much money we're going to bring in. I know so many people have asked me that. Why are we in this big deficit? What happened? Where's all this money go? Well, the money wasn't collected. It was money that we believed we were going to collect. And then we increased all the taxes and said, well, we're going to charge more for B&O, and we're going to charge more for sales tax, and we're going to charge more for gas tax, and all of these things. And then they didn't materialize because either businesses went out of business, or they just weren't earning at what was projected, the income. So I think that that is one thing I'm going to have to say, that one thing that I do appreciate from Governor Ferguson. He did actually put out a message before the tax package went to the floor for a vote, put out a message saying that he didn't want the wealth tax, that it wasn't proven, but also that we could not do our assumptions on 4.5% revenue, what we have been doing for the last 5 years, and obviously didn't pan out because we are $15 billion in the hole. So I do appreciate that he did that, he said, I'm not accepting a budget that overestimates how much money we're going to bring in. But I'm with Representative Volz. I don't think there's really anything good in that tax package. It's not going to help the affordability crisis in Washington, and like he said, the taxes for fuel. We know that diesel is going to be another 12 cents on the gallon, and so that's going to impact everybody's groceries, everybody's anything that you buy.
Okay. Well, the time definitely flies here on Spokane County Spotlight, and unfortunately we're coming up against the clock. But I want to thank both of you for being here today. Thank you for your service to this region, representing us over in Olympia, and thank you for joining us here on Spokane County Spotlight. So again, thank you all to our viewers at home. Again, our guests today were State Representative Suzanne Schmidt from the 4th Legislative District and State Representative Mike Volz from the 6th Legislative District. And thank you at home for joining us for another episode of Spokane County Spotlight.